Have you ever wondered why, just before something great happens in your life, everything seems to fall apart? Why does it feel like the universe grows silent when you need answers the most? It's not because you're forgotten. It's because you're being forged. God doesn't send great blessings to unprepared hands. Before elevation comes examination. Before the crown, the cross. Today I want to reveal the 3 harsh tests God uses, not to break you, but to build you. These aren't random struggles, they are sacred assignments. If you're facing them right now, don't ignore this, because on the other side of these tests waits the version of you that's ready for everything you've prayed for. Isolation is often mistaken for abandonment, but in reality it's one of the most profound tools God uses to shape a person's destiny. When you find yourself alone, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, and mentally, it can feel like a punishment. Friends drift away, relationships crumble, opportunities seem scarce, and the silence grows louder than any noise you've ever known. But what if that silence isn't emptiness? What if it's space being cleared so you can hear the voice that truly matters, your own and God's? In the noise of daily life, it's easy to get lost in roles, expectations, and the identities others project onto you. You become what people need you to be, what society expects, what your past has conditioned you to accept. But isolation strips all of that away. It leaves you face to face with the raw, unfiltered version of yourself. That's uncomfortable, because it forces you to confront truths you've been too busy or too afraid to acknowledge. The distractions are gone, the applause has faded, and the only reflection left is the one staring back at you. That's where the real work begins. Consider some of the greatest figures in history, leaders, visionaries, prophets, even everyday people who rose to extraordinary heights. Their journeys often included a season of isolation. Moses had the wilderness. Joseph had the pit and the prison. Even Jesus had 40 days in the desert. Why? Because isolation isn't where God forgets you. It's where he focuses on you. It's the sacred ground where he removes what no longer serves your purpose and reveals what does. When you're isolated, you're forced to rely less on external validation and more on internal conviction. You start questioning not just what you're doing, but why you're doing it. The ambitions that were once fueled by ego start to dissolve, and what's left is the authentic desire rooted in purpose. You realize that some of the people you thought you couldn't live without were actually distractions, and some of the things you chased were never meant to fulfill you in the first place. But make no mistake, this test isn't easy. It's harsh because it exposes wounds you've covered with busyness. It unearths insecurities you've buried under achievements. It feels like you're losing everything, but in truth, you're being stripped down to the foundation so that when you rise without the weight of what was never meant to go with you. Isolation also teaches you to differentiate between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is the ache of absence, but solitude is the power of presence, your own and God's. It's in solitude that your thoughts grow louder, not to torment you, but to be heard. The ideas that were whispers in the back of your mind become clear. The dreams you buried under practicality start to resurface. You find clarity because there's nothing left to distract you from it. During this test you might feel invisible, but invisibility is not insignificance. Think about a seed planted in the ground. It's buried in darkness, hidden from view. No one sees its struggle beneath the soil, but in that darkness, it's breaking, stretching, rooting, doing the very work that will allow it to one day rise and bear fruit. Isolation is your underground season. The world may not see your growth, but that doesn't mean you're not growing. And when the season of isolation ends, and it will end, you emerge different, stronger, wiser, more grounded. You no longer seek validation because you've already validated yourself. You no longer fear being alone because you've befriended solitude. You no longer chase people or things to fill a void because you've learned to fill it from within. So if you find yourself in a season of isolation, don't rush to escape it. Don't numb it with distractions or run from the discomfort. Sit with it. Listen to what it's teaching you, because in the silence you'll hear the whispers of your soul. In the stillness you'll find the presence of God. And in that sacred space you'll realize that isolation wasn't meant to break you. One of the most challenging tests God uses to prepare you for great blessings is the test of delayed gratification. It's the space between desire and fulfillment, between the prayer and the promise. This test is not just about waiting, it's about who you become while you wait. It's easy to have faith when things happen quickly, when doors open without resistance, when the results are immediate. But real growth comes in the seasons when nothing seems to be moving, when you've done everything right yet the breakthrough feels distant. It's in that delay that your character is refined, your patience stretched, and your trust in God truly tested. Delayed gratification feels uncomfortable because it clashes with our need for control. We live in a world that glorifies instant results. Fast food, quick responses, overnight success stories. But the most meaningful things in life don't follow that timeline. A tree doesn't grow overnight. A masterpiece isn't painted in an hour. A diamond isn't formed without enduring pressure and time. And the same principle applies to your dreams, your growth, and your purpose. If God gave you everything you wanted the moment you asked, you'd miss the lessons hidden in the waiting. You might receive the blessing, but you wouldn't be ready to handle it. The delay is not a denial, it's preparation. It's in the waiting that you learn discipline, the kind that keeps you grounded when success finally arrives. It's in the delay that you develop gratitude, because when you've waited for something, you cherish it more deeply. The time gap between sowing and reaping forces you to confront your motives. Are you pursuing this goal because it's part of your purpose, or just because you crave validation? Are you seeking growth, or just the applause that comes with achievement? Delayed gratification strips away superficial desires and reveals what truly matters. Think of it like training for a marathon. You don't become a runner by sprinting once and expecting to cross a finish line. You build endurance through consistent effort over time. The muscles grow stronger, not from the race itself, but from the days, weeks, and months of preparation leading up to it. The same applies to your spiritual and emotional growth. The waiting seasons are your training ground. They stretch your capacity, fortify your faith, and develop the resilience needed to sustain the blessings you're working toward. But waiting isn't passive. It's not about sitting idly by, hoping for things to magically change. Active waiting means continuing to show up, to do the work, to nurture your growth, even when there's no visible reward. It's about planting seeds with the confidence that they will grow, even if you can't see the roots forming beneath the surface. It's trusting the process when the progress isn't obvious. And here's the paradox. While the delay feels like a pause in your life, it's often the most productive season beneath the surface. Think about a caterpillar inside a cocoon. From the outside, it looks like nothing is happening. But inside, there's a complete transformation taking place. The delay is not inactivity, it's invisible progress. You're being shaped, molded, and strengthened for what's coming next. During this test, frustration can easily creep in. You might question your worth, your decisions, even your faith. But that's part of the refining process. Growth rarely feels good in the moment. It's uncomfortable because it's stretching you beyond your current limits. The temptation will be to give up, to settle for less because the waiting feels too hard. But remember, quitting doesn't speed up the process. It just means you have to start over. Every day you choose to keep going, even without immediate results, you're building the perseverance that will carry you through life's bigger challenges. Eventually the waiting ends, the door opens, the opportunity arrives, the prayer is answered. And when it does, you'll realize that you're not the same person who first asked for it. You've grown into someone who not only receives the blessing, but appreciates it, values it, and knows how to sustain it. The waiting wasn't a waste of time. It was the process that prepared you for everything you were meant to become. So if you're in a season of delay, don't lose heart. You're not stuck. You're being shaped. Trust the process, even when you can't see the progress. Because sometimes the blessing isn't just in what you're waiting for. The blessing is in who you become while you wait. Rejection and failure are two of the harshest tests God uses to prepare you for great blessings. They cut deep, not just because they close doors, but because they challenge your identity, your sense of worth, and your belief in your own purpose. Nothing feels more personal than being told no after giving your all, or falling flat after pouring your heart into something you believed in. It stings, and often it feels final. But rejection and failure are not endpoints. They are redirections, lessons in disguise, and necessary steps on the path to greatness. Rejection is never random. It may feel like life is unfair, like opportunities are slipping through your fingers, but often rejection is protection. It's God's way of closing a door that doesn't lead where you're meant to go. You might think you've found the perfect job, the ideal relationship, or the dream opportunity, but what you see is limited. God sees beyond the surface. He sees what that path could cost you in the long run. So when He allows rejection, it's not to diminish you, but to guide you towards something better. The problem is, in the moment, it doesn't feel like guidance. It feels like loss. But sometimes losing what you thought you needed is the only way to make space for what you truly deserve. Failure, too, is often misunderstood. Society conditions us to see failure as the opposite of success, but that's not true. Failure is part of success. No one reaches the top without stumbling along the way. Failure is feedback. It shows you what doesn't work, what needs to change, where you need to grow. Every mistake carries a lesson, but you only receive that lesson if you're willing to face failure head-on, without letting it define you. The greatest leaders, inventors, and visionaries didn't succeed because they avoided failure. They succeeded because they refused to let failure stop them. What makes this test so harsh is that it attacks the ego. Rejection and failure expose vulnerabilities we'd rather keep hidden. They challenge the narratives we tell ourselves about being good enough or worthy. But that's exactly the point. To carry great blessings, you need to be grounded in something deeper than external validation. You need a foundation built on resilience, purpose, and unshakable faith. And nothing builds that foundation like facing rejection and failure, learning from it, and rising again. There's a story in every setback, not just about the failure itself, but about how you responded. Did you let rejection shrink you, or did it sharpen you? Did failure make you bitter, or did it make you better? The people who achieve lasting success aren't the ones who never fall. They're the ones who refuse to stay down. They understand that rejection is a detour, not a dead end, and that failure is a chapter, not the whole story. One of the most powerful shifts you can make in life is changing the way you view rejection and failure. Instead of seeing them as signs that you're not enough, start seeing them as signs that you're being refined. Every no brings you closer to the right yes, Every failure carries a seed of wisdom that will grow if you're willing to nurture it. The pain of rejection teaches you self-reliance, the ability to believe in yourself even when no one else does. The sting of failure teaches you humility, reminding you that growth is a continuous process, not a destination you reach and forget. Rejection and failure also strip away what isn't authentic. They force you to confront whether you're pursuing something because it's truly your calling or because you crave approval. When you face rejection and still choose to keep going, it means your motivation comes from within, not from external applause. That's the kind of strength that lasts. That's the kind of strength needed to sustain great blessings. In the end, rejection and failure are not punishments, they're preparations. They build the resilience needed to handle success with grace, to face future obstacles with courage, and to remain grounded no matter what life throws at you. So the next time you face rejection, don't let it define you. Let it refine you. The next time you fail, don't see it as the end. See it as a lesson, a stepping stone, a necessary part of your journey. Because the truth is, you're not being held back. You're being prepared. And when the time is right, the blessings that come will be far greater than what you thought you lost. Pain is one of life's most powerful teachers, yet it's the lesson we often try the hardest to avoid. No one wakes up wishing for heartbreak, loss, disappointment, or struggle. But the reality is, pain is woven into the fabric of growth. It's the thread that stitches together our greatest transformations. The question isn't whether we'll experience pain, that's inevitable. The real question is, will we find purpose in it? Will we allow it to shape us into who we're meant to become, or will we let it break us? Pain has a way of stripping away illusions. When life is comfortable, it's easy to coast through without questioning much. But when pain enters the picture, it disrupts that comfort. It shakes the ground beneath your feet and forces you to confront things you'd rather ignore. Your fears, your insecurities, your unhealed wounds. It exposes the gaps between who you are and who you could be. That's why pain feels so overwhelming. It's not just about the event itself, but what it reveals within you. But here's the truth most people miss. Pain is not pointless. It's not just something you endure, it's something you can grow through. Every scar has a story, and often the most painful chapters hold the most valuable lessons. Pain teaches you resilience because surviving it shows you that you're stronger than you thought. It teaches you empathy because once you've been broken, you recognize that same brokenness in others, and you know how to reach them in ways you couldn't before. It teaches you gratitude because when you've lost something precious, you learn to cherish what remains. Think about how muscles grow. When you exercise, especially with weights, you're actually creating tiny tears in your muscle fibers. It sounds counterintuitive. How can breaking something make it stronger? But it's in the healing process that the muscle rebuilds itself thicker and more powerful than before. The same principle applies to your emotional and spiritual growth. The breaking isn't the end. It's the beginning of becoming stronger. The pain isn't the point. The growth is. Often we pray for strength, wisdom, and courage, but we don't realize that pain is the vehicle through which those qualities are developed. You don't become courageous without facing fear. You don't gain wisdom without making mistakes. You don't build strength without enduring struggles. We want the blessing without the burden, the lesson without the hardship. But they are inseparable. The purpose of pain isn't to punish you. It's to prepare you. It's also important to understand that pain shifts your perspective. When life shatters your expectations, you're forced to look at things differently. What once seemed important might lose its value, and things you took for granted suddenly become treasures. Pain clarifies what matters. It strips away superficial attachments and points you back to the core of who you are. In this way, pain isn't just a force that breaks, it's a force that reveals. Another hidden purpose behind pain is how it often pushes you toward change you wouldn't have chosen otherwise. Comfort can be a trap, a soft prison that keeps you stuck in places where you don't belong. Pain disrupts that comfort. It forces you to move, to grow, to leave behind what no longer serves you. Without pain, many people would never discover their potential because they'd never feel the urgency to rise. Pain is the catalyst that turns stagnation into transformation. But finding purpose in pain doesn't mean pretending it doesn't hurt. It doesn't mean minimizing your struggles or forcing a smile when your heart is breaking. It means acknowledging the pain, feeling it fully, and then asking, what is this trying to teach me? How can I grow from this? It's about shifting from why is this happening to me to what can this do for me? That shift doesn't erase the pain, but it gives it meaning. And meaning is what helps you endure. At some point you'll look back at your hardest moments and realize they were turning points. You'll see how they shaped your character, redirected your path, deepened your faith, or uncovered strengths you didn't know you had. The pain that once felt unbearable will become part of the story that defines your resilience. So, when you're in the middle of it, when the weight feels too heavy, remember this. The purpose behind the pain isn't to crush you. It's to create you. You're being refined, not ruined. And even though you can't see it now, the version of you that emerges from this will be stronger, wiser, and more aligned with the purpose you were always meant to fulfill. Faith isn't truly tested when everything is clear and certain. It's tested in the dark, in the spaces where nothing makes sense, where the future feels like a blank page and you don't know what's coming next. The test of faith in uncertainty is perhaps the hardest of all because it requires you to trust without proof, to believe without visible evidence, and to keep moving forward when you don't even know if you're on the right path. It's in these moments, when life feels unstable, when plans fall apart, when the road ahead is shrouded in fog, that your faith is stretched to its limits. Uncertainty has a way of making us feel small. It strips away the illusion of control that we like to hold on to. We plan, we predict, we prepare, but life has a way of reminding us that control is fleeting. And when that happens, fear creeps in. Fear of the unknown, fear of failure, fear of making the wrong choice. It's natural to want guarantees, to crave signs that you're on the right track. But faith isn't about having guarantees. It's about believing, even when there are none. The beauty and the challenge of faith is that it requires you to walk without seeing the whole picture. It's like holding a lantern in the dark. The light only reaches a few steps ahead, but as long as you keep moving, the path continues to reveal itself. The problem is we often want the entire map laid out before we take the first step. We want to know how everything will turn out before we risk anything. But that's not how faith works. Faith says, take the step, even if you don't see the staircase. In moments of uncertainty, it's easy to feel like God is silent. You pray, you search for answers, but all you hear is the echo of your own thoughts. That silence can be unsettling, but silence doesn't mean absence. Think about a teacher during a test. They're always quiet, not because they've left, but because it's time for you to apply what you've learned. The same applies to God during your tests of faith. His silence isn't abandonment. It's an invitation for you to trust what He's already placed within you. Uncertainty also forces you to confront your deepest beliefs. It's easy to say you have faith when life is smooth, but what happens when everything feels like it's falling apart? Do you still believe in your purpose when doors close? Do you still trust that there's a plan when nothing goes according to yours? This test strips faith down to its core. Not a feeling, not a fleeting moment of inspiration, but a deep, unshakable conviction that there's meaning even in the mess, that there's purpose even in the pain. But faith isn't passive. It doesn't mean sitting back, hoping things magically work out. It's active. It's choosing to get up each day and show up for your life, even when you're unsure. It's making decisions based on hope, not fear. It's doing the next right thing, even if you don't know what comes after that. It's believing that every step you take in faith is not wasted, even if it doesn't lead where you expected. Interestingly, uncertainty is where some of life's most beautiful moments are born, because when you don't know what's next, you're open. You're not confined by expectations or rigid plans. There's space for surprise, for growth, for discoveries you never would have made if everything had gone according to plan. Some of the best things in life come out of the unknown. Relationships you never saw coming, opportunities you didn't anticipate, lessons you didn't know you needed. When you're tested by uncertainty, remember that it's not just about reaching the destination. It's about who you become along the way. Faith isn't about avoiding fear. It's about moving forward in spite of it. It's about choosing to believe that even in the chaos, there's order. Even in the darkness, there's light. Even in the unknown, you are being guided. So when everything feels uncertain, when the future is unclear, and fear starts to whisper that you're lost, hold on. Not to the illusion of control, but to the certainty that you're not walking alone. Trust that the same force that brought you this far isn't finished with you yet. You may not know what's next, but you're not meant to. Your job isn't to see the whole path. Your job is to take the next step and believe that it matters.